Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and for those of you with me for the first time, I'm Melissa Reed and I'm a mixed media artist from Pennsylvania. So you can see I have some things spread out in front of me today. I've got some different collage papers that I have been saving up. Hoarding is probably a better word. I've got stacks and stacks of these, so I decided rather than make anything new, I was going to go through my stash and pull some interesting colors out that I thought would work nicely together in kind of muted, sort of autumny kind of tones. And we are going to today work with a collage. And my idea is to kind of have a central sort of composition, which I don't typically do, but I had a vision here, and so we're going to give it a shot. I'm using one of my 6 by 12 inch cradled boards. I ordered this off of Amazon, and there will be a link to that as well as the other items that I'm using. These come in raw wood, and I just put some Liquitex white gesso on there and let it dry before I got started. So I'm picturing that kind of centralized design, but using different squares and rectangle shapes that are going to offset each other and kind of contrast. And we're going to have some different patterns and textures and all kinds of different things. I'm not sure which of these papers that I will definitely be using, but they're all here. So that's where the intuitive part comes into my intuitive process. I'm just going to have them all there, and whatever I think looks good in that moment is what we're going to go with. There's some really cool papers here, and if you're interested in learning how I made any of these, drop me a comment. I'm actually planning on doing a video demonstrating some of my better known ones. Okay, so I've got some Naples yellow, some Azo gold, and some titanium white that I am mixing in my little plate there. I'm going to just do a base color, and I wanted something warm but not too dark and semi-neutral. So at first I was going to do a cream color mixing the Azo gold and titanium white, but I also kind of wanted the yellow, so I thought, hey, why not just mix all three together and see what we can come up with. So that's what I did, and I got that slightly warmer gold color that we're going to cover the entire board with there. I'm just using one of my standard old brushes that's nothing special. It's also ancient and not in the best shape, but it does a really good job for things like applying gesso and applying base colors on my pieces. Now comes the fun part. I'm going to start the collage, and like I said, not too much of an idea except that I want a centralized design and I want different squares and rectangles of my different collage papers. That's one that I made a few videos ago. I'll link that in the end if you are interested in seeing that. And I'm gluing that down with some of the Liquitex matte medium there. I'm using the more liquid one. I have a thicker gel one too, which is good for heavier papers, which I should have used in the end, but I didn't. I ended up using the liquid the whole way through, but it's going to just be fine. So I am randomly just pulling these papers out and kind of deciding on the fly if I want them to be a part of the design and where I want them to go. Some of the sides I am leaving more clean and cut with scissors, and some of them, as you can see there, that I did with those two very pale pink pieces, I just went in and ripped them, tore the edges off by hand because I wanted to have that kind of frayed look like I did there with that piece. That's a little bit hard to tell what it is on the screen, but that's a book page that I have some gold dots painted on there. I either painted that might actually be gold leaf. I can't remember. It's been so long since I've made that paper, a couple years at least. But at any rate, it's book page with rows of gold dots on there, and that's going down. I just want to get a lot of different colors and textures, but ones that all go together and look like they belong together. That piece that I'm working on there, I made that with, I think, some acrylic, either acrylic inks or possibly high flow acrylic paints. I think it was actually the high flow acrylic paints. and that's on a piece of tissue paper. There's also a variety of papers that I've used there. For the majority of my collage papers, I do use tissue paper because I like that you can often see through them, and if there's any white showing, it kind of just melts into the background, so they are very translucent, sometimes even transparent. And I like the thinness to them, just like the physical thinness, so that it's not too much bulk on the top of the surface of the piece that I'm working on. But some of those pages are, like I said, book pages, and there's also a couple gel prints that I used that I pulled onto just regular copy paper there as well. I tend to save just about everything, hoping that I will be able to use it again. And eventually it does find a place. That little chunk that I just put down there was tissue paper with black dots printed onto it. So that little piece that I just picked up and set back down is one of my burned pieces. I will actually put a link to a video where I made some of those. I really thought when I started this out that I was going to end up using that in this piece, but I guess spoiler alert, I did not end up using it. Kind of when I was thinking about this in my head, I saw that as a focal point because it does go along with the color and the theme and the idea that I had, but every time I set it down, it just looked a little bit too disconnected and disjointed from everything else, so ultimately I did not end up using it. What I am using here, though, is another, that's that orange that I tore off there of that red and orange sheet. That was definitely made with acrylic inks on tissue paper. I believe I have a video demonstrating that. If I do, I'll stick it at the end there for you to check out. But if not, like I said, I am going to do a video on making some of these papers and some of the ones that I use more often because people have asked, and it just kind of seems like it might be time to do that. So I pulled this green sheet out there, and I realized nothing else on there is green, but I like the way that it contrasts nicely with those bright red and oranges, and it's not super bright, but it's bright enough, and it just kind of really fit in with everything else going on. These purely abstract pieces are a lot of fun to make because you don't need to, and it actually kind of stops you from overthinking what you're doing, because in the end, there's nothing that it's technically, quote, supposed to look like. I'm not trying to make an image of a recognizable object. I am strictly going on intuition and going for pure color, pattern, composition, and that process in itself is very intuitive to me. So it's a nice way to kind of free up your mind from all of the critical thought that you do on a daily basis. I liked the way that orange looked in that paper. Excuse me. So I ended up just putting a little bit out on a plate and pushing that a little bit further in some of the areas. It warmed everything up really nicely. And then I had that kind of stripy black, white, and gray piece there, and it doesn't technically go with anything else because it's a very cool piece, but I did like that about it. I thought it might stand out a little too much, but I ended up really kind of liking it, and a lot of that gets covered up anyway. That's another thing to keep in mind if you're doing a piece like this, and I have to remind myself all the time, is not to get too tied up in what the current thing that you're working on looks like, because for me, I work in layers. So the base layer is not the most important thing. It's there just to serve as a base, and it's going to peek through in certain areas, but it's not going to necessarily be entirely visible. So really just getting that layer down is the most important part. Just get something down and go from there. So what I'm cutting out there is some writing that I did, and those are, some of them are actual words. There's not a full thought or anything on there. It's just random things. Some of them aren't even words. Some of it's just asemic writing, which is just abstract writing. It doesn't actually say anything. But I took my pen and nib and dipped that in some high flow black acrylic paint and wrote that down on tissue paper. Now I am very tediously by hand just tearing that out. I did not want that to have any hard edges on it. It could have, it would have been fine, but in that moment I didn't want that. So I went ahead and tore all of that out, and again, just putting all of that down with the matte medium. And I was seeing 2 rows of that, so getting that one laid down, I also tore the edges off of that as well. As I'm working on these, I'm always in the back of my mind trying to keep track of what the next step is going to be. So I'm thinking about that now, and I'm kind of coming up blank. So this is a point where I stopped and walked away from it for a while and then went back to it. And when I did, I felt like it needed a larger shape in the bottom right-hand corner. So I don't know if you can tell on the screen, but that is actually a gel print of an artificial flower, which is something that I use in a lot of my pieces. Now I'm cutting it up so that it's going to be very abstracted, and that's fine because I wasn't really looking for it to be recognizable. I did like the pattern in it, but mostly I liked the fact that it was extremely transparent, and I liked that little touch of copper on the paint in there because that's actually printed in copper paint. And I pulled it with matte medium, so the background is going to be clear. So you're going to see here, when I glue that down, it's basically going to kind of disappear, and you'll just see a tiny little bit of the pattern on there. You can see it in person a little better, but it's subtle, but it's there, and that's kind of what I wanted down in that spot. So after that, I decided I wanted to go in and do a little bit of ink work with a variety of pens. I had a red gel pen there, and that is a black Posca marker, which is an acrylic paint pen. I highly recommend these if you've never used them. You can actually use those right on the jelly plate too to do any kind of drawing that you want, and they pull up really nicely. And I'm going in and just doing very small lines very close together. I just wanted to get a little bit of that design everywhere. And I do end up carrying those lines through at the end, which you will see. Now, this part that I'm putting on there right now, I hated a whole lot, so I end up covering the majority of it up. I'm not really sure what I was going for there, but it definitely felt like a fail to me, so I let it alone at that point. I ended up going back to it here in a few minutes and did some more work on it, and I hated it even further. And then that's when I decided, okay, I've got to figure something out because A, it's very black and very obvious. The eye wants to go right to it, but also like it doesn't make any sense with anything else going on. So it just needed to be dealt with. And I think I did that in a pretty decent way, which you'll see here coming up. But again, I'm just going in with those pens and making more of those lines on there, which is a pattern that I often do in my mixed media work. You can kind of see there, I'm taking you in to show you a close-up. And that's when I went back in to try to work on that area. I thought adding those lines was going to help, but I just ended up extra disliking it. So you'll see here in a moment, I'm going to try to figure out what I want to do with that, and just to get some of it out of there. Even just right there working on it, it just seemed a little too much. So what I ended up doing, I had a couple of those scraps of the paper with the words on them, and I'm going to glue some of those down so it distracts a little bit from that design. It still doesn't entirely take it away, but it does move the eye a little bit more, and so you're not just kind of stalled out over top of that, if you know what I mean. And for the next step, I was also a little bit unsure of where to go, so I slept on it, and I had this paper that I made, this kind of like a lace paper, and I really wanted to use it. Every time I set it down, though, something about it just didn't look quite right, and then I figured out that I think it was the coloration of it. It's very transparent right now, which is good, but there's no paint on it whatsoever. It's just the color of the tissue paper that I made it out of, and I thought that it needed to be maybe warmed up a little bit. So I kept trying various shapes and sizes of it everywhere, and finally settled on the two that I have sitting there. I'm going to mix up here a little tiny bit of like a cream color with titanium white and the azo gold. And I'm going to mix a good bit of the matte medium in with that, which is going to make it more transparent. The azo gold on its own is very transparent, but the titanium white, of course, is very opaque, and that's going to kind of override everything. So I mixed a good bit of the medium in with it. I also sprayed I'm using a watercolor brush there to paint this on, and I sprayed that down with water, so it's going to be even more translucent. And it's just basically giving these the slightest bit of warmth and some kind of color to it. It's still fairly transparent, but not entirely. And once I set those down and let them get good and dry, and I came back with my matte medium and started to glue them down, I think it really worked out very well with this piece. And you can see there what I'm talking about. It just added just enough to it that it's gonna work for me now. So I'm just pulling off some more pieces there. There were some square edges that I didn't really like, and I'm putting down a good bit of that medium because these are thicker. The paper is gathered in some places. This is where I should have probably used the gel medium instead of the liquid, but it's fine. I did use a whole lot of it, and because of that, I had to let it dry for a really long time. Not a really long time. I mean, it's still an acrylic media, so I don't know. Normally that stuff will dry within an hour. I gave this one a couple of hours because I wanted to make sure it was good and dry before I did anything else to it. I did go in and hit it with the hairdryer for a little bit just to dry off the any of the base, any of the surface there that's not that specific paper, because I wanted to go in right away and do a little bit more line work with my micron pen. I felt like it needed something to tie it together. On the right hand side there, that collage piece with the words was running all the way to the edge, and I liked that, but I thought maybe that needed to happen on some of the other sides as well. So I carried out the fine line detail work that I had put in some of the other places just to bring that together a little bit more and make it a little more cohesive. But after that, that was kind of it. I decided to stop there. I'll be spraying that with Krylon Crystal Clear Acrylic Spray, and I'm going to show you here in just a minute what we ended up with. You'll have to let me know what you think. I'm really happy with the composition. I like the way this turned out. Let me know if you do as well. And if you do like it and you would not mind giving me a thumbs up, that really helps out my channel. Also, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, I would really appreciate that. That pushes me out to more people, which helps out the channel very much as well. But thank you all for joining me. And this piece will be available in my Etsy shop if anyone is interested. There is a link to that and all of my other social media in the description of this video. But thank you all so much, and I look forward to coming back with another video for you next Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Have a great day.